What about A Love Supreme?
Love Supreme. It's another crazy, based on a book by Kent Nussey, who is a Toronto writer. It's his first novel. So I'm sitting at the bar at Gato Nero, which is my coffee place at college in Crawford, and every morning there's a bunch of us, and there's like Brian, the house painter, and there's Lionel, also a house painter. Just a collection of different people. There's Joe Pantalone, and there's the guys. And so one day Brian, the house painter, slides his book over, and he says, because he knows I'm a film guy, right?
Yeah.
He says, and I'm like, what's this? He goes, it's this really great book. You're a filmmaker. You should read this. I think it would make a really good film. And I come to realize that Brian is secretly taking acting lessons at night, right? The house painter, that he wants to be the guy, right? So I read the book and I go, wow, it's a beautiful, stunning book, but there's barely a story in there. Like, I don't think it would make much of a movie. And he looked kind of sullen and sad. And I said, but if you want, I'll think about it, and maybe we'll take some pictures for your acting class of a scene, pick a scene. So we go out and we shoot the scene of him, walking around, looking. The story's about a guy who's trying to write a book about John Coltrane's seminal album, A Love Supreme. And he meets a neighborhood girl and they have a couple of dates, and that's pretty much the story, right? So it's not a riveting narrative, but it's a beautifully sort of told story about neighborhood and love and music and what Coltrane is trying to say, and about jazz and men and women and drinking and all the good things. So then we thought, and I remembered, there's that great movie by Chris Marker, La Jetée. So we kind of look at that and I think, well, if Brian the house painter wants to buy the beers and the pizza every Saturday, we'll go out and shoot him doing stuff from the book. So we start to do this. And then we start to get other people involved, and they say, okay, I'll play Carrie the girl, and I'll play, Harris the friend. So over, I guess, the last 6 years, we've been going out occasionally and shooting the book. No script, no money, no budget, just Rick O'Brien, the former manager of Bar Italia, with a still camera, and have collected about 20,000 images, and quite kind of stunning, and kind of followed the story from winter to spring to summer. And we shoot the Taste of Little Italy and the Easter parade down College Street, and the hot waitresses and all the bars, and and suddenly the stories emerge that we go, wow, this is actually turning into something very beautiful. So about a month ago, we finally decided we should start maybe editing this to see if it is something. And we were quite delighted to see that same editors, Jeremy Muntz, who cut Tracey and Pontypool and Claire's Hat, like a real genius, awesome editor. So we've now kind of created rushes. So now we're kind of saying, okay, we can now, I think, find a way to make this a little movie. So it's a weird, I don't know, certain things propel you or certain projects attract you for different reasons. Sometimes it's for money. Like, I'll do Killer Wave, they pay me a lot of money and I'll go to Montreal and shoot Killer Wave about killer tidal waves trying to attack America. And then you do Love Supreme for pizza and beer, because you think, really in the end, you think, well, what's it all about? You just really want to, as the filmmaker, as the guy, you're like, what am I doing this for? I don't know. And then you realize, well, I just want to record pictures of pretty girls and cool guys and awesome places where we hang out, and it becomes this sort of record of your life at that time, sort of, or your friends, and it's kind of this heightened kind of scrapbook with a soundtrack and nicer photography, So, but yeah, Love Supreme, it's probably another 4 or 5 years before it's finished, because we just work on it when we're sort of in the mood. But now that for the first time, we thought, wow, I think we've got a something here. And I don't know if it'll be a feature, or if it'll be an hour, or if it'll be premiere on a cell phone. Like, it's sort of, I don't know, it's one of those weird things that I'm sure, like these other movies where it started to be one thing and ended up something else completely unknown to me at the time. I'm sure that you know, A Love Supreme's got some good karma around it, and you know, I'm sure it's going to end up to be something pretty interesting. As long as it's not boring, as long as it's not dull-witted and slow and like whatever you say about Hardcore Logo 2, it's not dull. It's weird and perhaps quite indulgent, but you know, it's entertaining and perhaps slightly misguided, but you know, it's got a good heart. So.
How would you characterize your relationship with television? Because you have Twitch City that is basically canonized in Canada at this point, but then you have a lot of writers that will refer in varying terms to the rest of the work as kind of hack work. But it doesn't seem like it's fair to just have two extremes.
I feel a little bad about, because in Hardcore Logo 2, I end up in an ice cave with my spirit animal, and it speaks to me and it tells me that stop making shitty television with a pedophile, and it says you should be, you know, you should make movies like you're supposed to. And I just felt a little bit bad about that line because, I mean, yes, I started making movies before I started making television, but when I think about it, I grew up watching television way more than movies. Like you know, you'd see the occasional movie, but it was more about, I think it was television that shaped me way more than movies. You know, watching Land of the Giants and watching, you know, Get Smart and, you know, Mission Impossible and, you know, Ghost, you know, whatever was going. And television was a huge, and it's funny, I realized, you know, I never really talk about that because most filmmakers go, oh yes, it was the Bertolucci film I saw when I was 12 that hearkened me to the cinema. Nothing wrong with Bertolucci, but weirdly, I think it was probably television that excited me about the idea of, like, I don't know, stories on moving pictures and that sort of thing. So, you know, television is a great way to make money, and it's a great way to learn your craft. I don't know how you would do it if you know, how to be a director without constantly. I've shot a lot of stuff, and generally, I'd say, you know, 95% of the time, I've had an awesome time and met incredibly talented people. And you know, it might not be the kind of television story that you would go, I think I'm going to make a story about, you know, some teenage girls that run a soda fountain or something, you know, whatever. But at the same time, it's like you're always, you know, you're meeting great actors for the most part, and very talented writers and designers and DOPs, and most of the people that end up working with me in these independent features come from television. Rob Gray, who's the production designer, I met him on a television commercial. Steve Cousins, I met him on a series. Steve shot Tracey Fragments. I met Steve on this show called Tilt, which was about gambling in Vegas. Gosh, you know, Steve McCaddy, I met him on Emily of New Moon. He played Cousin Jimmy, the retarded farmhand, and Steve plays the, you know, the title character in Pontypool. So so many people that I met, and it's kind of like an awesome casting goldmine for talent, because, you know, I don't know how it goes in other cities, but Toronto runs on television, and a lot of cities now. It's so, you know, features are my first choice, because in features the director is the guy or the girl, whereas in television it's the writer and the producer, and the director is really there to kind of just get it done on time and bring some excitement and keep everybody's spirits up, and, you know, bring a little flourish. And if you become invited to become part of the gang, like that happened on certain shows like Degrassi or Queer as Folk, or there's lately The Transporter, which was just shot, and a few other shows where you like do a whole bunch of them, so you become, and it becomes really fun that way. So you're not just coming and going, but you become part of the whole machine, and are then maybe allowed a little bit more to make more of a contribution, and it becomes a bit more close to you. But yeah, I love, you know, and everybody I talk to now, they're all like, wow, you know, doing this and that. We're actually, you know, cooking up this series idea early on. It's called 69. It's about Rochdale College, which was this awesome college in Toronto during the late 60s, an experimental college that started with high hopes and great ideals and great thinkers, and quickly descended into the sort of Lord of the Flies kind of swamp of drugs and paranoia and craziness.
Dream Tower, right?
Dream Tower, yeah. So Ron Mann has made a short documentary about it called Dream Tower, and there's been some books, but it's a fantastic, I think, a fantastic idea for a series. And Brian over there is helping out right now, and we'll see what we can do. But it's every once in a while you think, it's always, because I've always had, we've always been, we had a series with Twitch City, another series which spun out of Dance Me Outside.
That was the Res, right?
That was the Res. Yeah. So it's always been fun to be part of a series, because I like shooting, I like working. And when you make independent films, sometimes it's a long journey between, being on set. It's like, wow, finish that one, and maybe 4 years later you're making the next one. So TV is great because it's, I always look at TV as kind of like they're like the folk songs of the age. They're kind of singing the songs and they're bringing the news. They're commenting. They're kind of more like what Moses Neimer does, for example, and his notion of television, I think, is really sort of brilliant and genius. It's about the flow.
Yeah.
He would say to me, he says, we make a movie a day in television, and you film guys are pussies, It takes you like months to make a film. In television, we make a movie a day. And I was like, yeah. So.
You mentioned the folk songs, which is a really interesting comparison because it reminds me of kind of how we theorize genre, how there may be repetitive tropes, but it's about what you're saying beneath those repetitions. And I'm wondering how in television you've worked with genre, like straight up genres like Lex, and Pontypool seemed to have a lot of success because of that. Like even though it wasn't a traditional genre film, the fact that it was appealing to that audience and working within those tropes, it kind of differentiated itself in that way.
Yeah, I was really, and I love genre movies. I realized, well, I haven't really made, like road films are almost a genre, but not quite, you know what I mean? There's a history, but you don't think of them the same way you think of horror movies or science fiction movies or cop thrillers or pornos or, clearly defined genres. And, especially sort of horror and science fiction, I've always loved, like from a small lad, those are the things I gravitated to first, was like Planet of the Apes and 2001, Silent Running, and Blade Runner, and Logan's Run, and like anything that was sort of vaguely sci-fi or thing, I would be the first to see it. And so for some reason, it took us a long time to get around to making a sort of a horror movie, and I was lucky to run into Crazy Tony Burgess. Tony keeps me appraised of the chatter and the things that people say about Pontypool, because it's a very deep and intelligent group of people that love sort of horror movies. Like they're very opinionated, and they see everything.
They're experts.
And they're experts. Yeah. I mean, they see everything, and that's very, very impressive. So that kind of opened my eyes a little bit to, like, wow, so we're going to do more of that. And so it's great to play in, because then suddenly you're going, wow, we're right in the genre. So you look at that genre, you look at the canon, you say, okay, well, what are the scariest movies ever made, to yourself? And so you think, okay, well, when we did Pontypool, we were thinking, I haven't seen a lot of films actually, but well, The Tenant, that's sort of scary and weird, and Night of the Living Dead, and so there are certain movies that we thought, well, let's kind of channel some of that sort of claustrophobia and that kind of whatever paranoia and that kind of, you see it but you don't see it. So we knew we were making one of those because we couldn't afford the zombies. So we're like, okay, we're making one of the ones that you don't see it. You just sort of, and it was very effective, I think, for a certain group of people. They're like, wow, kind of did something in the zombie genre, not even just the horror genre, but the specific, a huge zombie fan base of who are very rabid and opinionated, as I said, about their films. And so I feel like we were embraced by the zombie people. Some not so much because we didn't have a lot of gore, but there was the general acceptance, like we kind of earned our place somewhere in that zombie. So we felt very proud of having been invited into the fold, you know, having kind of passed the audition. So now we're like, all right, now get us a little bit of coin, and we'll do a little bit more in the zombie genre.
What does the future hold then?
Well, in Zombieland, like Tony's book is called Pontypool Changes Everything. So the plan always from the start was to make a movie for each word of the title. So Pontypool is the first one.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And I guess the next one will be either called just Changes or Pontypool Changes. And then the last one, so it's a little trilogy. So the other two are basically written. We're just doing some polishing, and I don't know, it's a winter thing, so it's either shoot in the studio or freeze our asses off doing these other ones. But they're quite great, and they all come from Tony's book, and Tony's also quite prolific in some other stories that he's been writing recently. But yeah, genres, you know, Western genre is also a great genre that we were talking earlier about Billy the Kid, so we're kind of, that's very close. It's sort of an embarrassment of riches right now because, you know, we've been developing these things for 15 years, right? So the money that I make in TV land, you know, some of that goes to supporting some writers a little bit. You know, it's not a lot, but it's just to kind of get it going, and once I feel like it's kind of getting something, then I'll invest a bit more and try to bring some other money to it. So, and it just takes a long time sometimes for these films to be ready, you know, like it's often, I think the fastest, probably triggers maybe the fastest sort of from like thinking let's make a movie to shooting it. But often it's like 5 years, right? From like, hey, let's make a zombie movie. And then 5 years later, you'll be lucky to be like calling action. Because it's just, I don't know, it's like all the stuff you're trying to, other stuff you're doing just to kind of make a living or to do whatever it is that you do, to focusing on that one thing that's going to be awesome. It just seems to take some time. But yeah, there's lots of amazing stuff right now. So now it's just like we got to find some rich bastard to help us kind of execute, you know?
And in your experience, it would start as a zombie film, and then in 10 years it'd become a Western?
Right. Well, maybe the zombie becomes the porno film or something, or, you know.
I think that's a great place to end this.
All right.
Thanks so much, Bruce.
Yeah, thank you. I hope I didn't talk too much.
No, I could have gone for more, but Brian was giving me the 5 minutes.
Yeah, I've got my daughter's having a play tonight, so I've got to
that's great.
going to see her as a bird in a play. Yeah, so it's pretty. Yeah, thank you for your conversation. That was great. Yeah, great
I had
questions.
A lot. Yeah. Is Billy the Kid close?
Yeah, it's pretty close. It's we've got a draft, and we've sat with Michael, and sort of Don McKellar is attached to it, and he wants to do a full pass. So I'm hoping that this year we get all happy with the script, and maybe if we're lucky, maybe sort of end of next year we go shoot a motherfucking Western.